The Prime Minister goes on a walking holiday. The previous time she came back and announced the general election. Didn't go particularly well. This time she comes back and out of the blue announces she's decided she's going to stay on and fight the next general election in 2022 as leader of the Conservative Party. There are some in the party welcoming it, others saying, hey, hang on a second, Theresa, it isn't your choice, it's our choice and the members' choice. Either way, do you want Theresa May to be our Prime Minister for the next 10 years? Well, the number to call is 0345 60 60 973. And if you had detected a slight change of voice, you'd be right, because this is Nigel Farage standing in on Drive for Ian Dale. I'll be here all week, including tomorrow. And I will, later on in this programme, make an announcement about my future career with LBC. So that'll be coming before very long. But without further ado, I'm going to go to Theo Usherwood, LBC's political editor. Theo, what is it about walking holidays and this Prime Minister?
It's the fresh air. It's the reinvigoration of walking, whether it be in Snowdonia, like it was in April, and then she came back and announced that she was going to call a snap election. This time, of course, it was a 3-week break in Italy and then in Switzerland with her closest confidant, her husband Philip. She came back and she decided that she was going to lay down a marker to anybody who thought that they could challenge her at the upcoming Conservative Party conference, which starts in October, the very beginning of October. And she was basically saying, if you want to challenge me, you're going to have to do it to my face on a stand at an event at that conference, because she is not going to stand down. She's here for the long term.
I said I wasn't a quitter, and there's a long-term job to do. There's an important job to be done in the United Kingdom. We stand at a really critical time in the UK. Yes, that's partly about Brexit and getting Brexit right, but if you think back to what I said when I became Prime Minister, when I stood in Downing Street, there are many other issues that we need to address. Long-term challenges in our country, ensuring that people don't feel left behind, that we are able to see the country that is working for everyone and prosperity spread across the country.
So is she really telling us she wants to be the Prime Minister for the next 10 years?
It is 10 years. You're quite right to point that out, because, of course, if she stands in 2022... she has to implement that manifesto. She can't suddenly hand over the reins to somebody else. Look, could she have said something completely different going into this? Could she have said the opposite? Could she have set a deadline like David Cameron did before the 2015 general election? He turned himself into what many would say a lame duck Prime Minister.
And Blair did before, in a way.
Blair did before him, exactly, with Gordon Brown champing at the bit to take over. And that's the argument against saying, as there had been speculation at the weekend, that she could step down in August 2019 at the conclusion of the Brexit talks. But what Theresa May is actually doing quite smartly, I think, is finding protection amongst Conservative Eurosceptics. She's been very clear that she's still prepared to walk away from the table, despite not having that overall, whopping 3-figure majority, not getting that at the election. She's still prepared to, make sure that when it comes to, we've seen the talks today, haven't we, between Michel Barnier and David Davis, not back down and pay 100 billion euros or whatever it is to the European Union as part of that divorce bill. She's sticking to her guns, and that goes down very well with Conservative backbenchers. I've been speaking to Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, in the last few minutes, and he said that when it comes to a challenge, everybody has to put aside their grievances or their unhappiness from what happened on June the 8th and get behind Theresa May.
I talked to a lot of Conservative members of Parliament, and I talked to a lot of Conservative members around the country, and my sense is that the membership across the country, the people who will be at the conference, have come to exactly the same view as Conservative members of Parliament. They don't want self-indulgence. They don't think this is a time for people to be promoting themselves. It's a time for us to be serving the national interest, doing the important work that we have been given to do, and getting on with it.
Perhaps I'm missing something, Theo, but it seems to me that so many of these Conservative MPs talk behind the back of their hand or in private over a glass of something and say she's absolutely hopeless. She was a useless leader in the general election. She's humorless, she's cold, she hasn't really reached out to us properly, and in public, it's all fine and dandy. Is that unfair?
That's one interpretation. I think there's a feeling, I think you're right to pick up on, Nigel, that there is still a degree of bad blood about the way that Theresa May's closest aides, Nick Timothy, Fiona Hill, ran the operation in the run-up to that election and the way that they were frozen out. Theresa May is not renowned for, and she's made a play of it herself, hasn't she, for, glad-handing, patting, going around, holding meetings, having parties, little canapes and drinks up in the flat of number 10 and trying to woo the Conservative backbenchers. She's made a play of, that's not her style. But for the moment, they know, Conservative backbenchers know, that if there's a leadership challenge, any idea of simply rolling away without having to have a general election is not going to work. There would have to be an election because the country would simply be unfeasible not to have one. And then you have Jeremy Corbyn coming up on the rails. He's still polling at over 40%. He's had a good summer out campaigning, whether you agree with him or not, doesn't matter. But he could come up on the rails and suddenly the Conservatives could find themselves out of power. They'd lose their seats. They'd go down to, say, 250 MPs in Parliament, and many of them would be out of jobs. And they don't want that to happen.
No. Theo, Usherwood, Elvis, thank you. Well, let's go straight to the independently minded backbenchers of the Conservative Party. I can think of nobody more independently minded than Peter Bone, who was the Conservative MP for Wellingborough and Rushden. Peter, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Nigel. I'm sitting in Rushden Lakes, a new leisure and retail development, along with Tom Purslove, and who you'll remember.
I do.
He joins mine, and we all work together so successfully in Grassroots Out. And now we're about to, in the next few months, come out of this dreadful European superstate, and we need Theresa May to deliver that.
So, Peter, let me get this right. You campaigned with me and many others, as did Tom Purslove, your colleague, from your neighbouring seat, and you went against Theresa May, who, of course, was part of the establishment and was a Remainer, along with the Prime Minister and George Osborne. Are you seriously telling me, Peter, that she is the right Prime Minister for Brexit and beyond?
Well, she was hardly an enthusiastic Remainer. I think David Cameron had to prod her to do anything of it. And so, from that point of view, not sure about that. But the real thing is she's clearly determined to deliver Brexit. And, I mean, you're already a national hero over Brexit, and quite rightly so. But if she delivers it and delivers, ending free movement, stopping giving billions of pounds to the EU, making her own laws in her own countries, judged by her own judges, she'll be a bit of a national hero. She does that, and Peter, I think she can go on.
Peter, she would be, but I mean, my problem with it is I watched her in that general election in which she performed pretty poorly. Maybe you disagree, I don't know, but I thought she performed pretty poorly. And I watched Jeremy Paxman ask her 4 times, as a Remainer, Mrs May, do you now believe in Brexit? And not once did she say yes. She simply said, we're following the will of the people.
Yeah, but now that's changed. I mean, you're right about walking in the Swiss Alps. Maybe that's because it's not part of the EU. She's been invigorated.
Well, it could be, yeah.
and she, me, I wouldn't say this, I didn't believe it. She is absolutely determined to deliver the sort of Brexit that you and I want. You've been working all your political life for it. I've been working all my political life. Let's get it done.
No, fine. Well, I tell you what, if you're right about that, Peter, I, in many ways, am mightily relieved to hear you saying it. But come on, honestly, do you really see Theresa May being the right person to be Prime Minister for the next 10 years? Because that's effectively what she said in Japan today.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is, if she delivers this Brexit, and she will be a national hero, I think there's no doubt about that. And she could then quite honestly expect to go on and lead the Conservative Party into the next general election and hopefully win it. It does come, of course, down to that question. And, the establishment are working against Brexit, the people in my party working against Brexit. It's a huge task. If she can get a proper Brexit and overcome all these people, then why shouldn't she have a chance of going on?
No, I understand. I get that. If she's a success, then going on in some ways makes sense. But doesn't it look a little bit arrogant to say, I have decided that I will lead the Conservative Party in the next general election and beyond? Ultimately, isn't that a choice for the Conservative Party itself?
Yeah, and we all know that is the case. But when there's such silly season speculation that she was going to go in a few months or whatever, it has to be put to rest and say, my intention is to carry on, my intention is to get a good deal on Brexit, and my intention is to go in the next election. Absolutely right. We know, of course, ultimately that's down to the Conservative Party who they want as leader. But what I'm saying is, if the Brexit is a success, which I believe she will deliver, then she has every right to go on. And that will be the test, won't it? If someone interviews you after Brexit and say, Theresa May, actually, she's done a good job, then she has the right to go on. And that's the test.
Peter Bone, MP for Wellingborough, I promise you, if by the middle of 2019 we've left the European Union, we're paying no contributions, there are no floppy transitional deals, we've ended free movement, we've got all the things that you and I campaign for on platforms up and down the country, I will go down on bended knee and say she's a heroine. But I have a suspicion that it isn't quite going to work out like that. But Peter Bone, thank you very much indeed. Well, fascinating. And it's really, as Theo said earlier, it very much is the Eurosceptic wing of the party that are now rallying very strongly behind this Prime Minister, because however she voted in that referendum, and however poorly she answered Jeremy Paxman's questions, it would certainly appear from the outside that she and her chief negotiator David Davis are intent on getting Brexit. Now, whether that's quite the Brexit that I was looking for or not, I don't know. But perfectly clear, the Eurosceptic Tories are rallying behind her, and from my point of view, she said what she said to dampen down and end damaging speculation at the Tory conference in a few weeks' time. But I wonder how you, the folks at home, feel about this. Do you really want Theresa May to be our Prime Minister for the next 10 years? Think about it and call me on 0345 60 60 973. I'm Nigel Farage, here on LBC. It's 4:15. Prime Minister May goes walking in the Alps and she comes back and says, yes, I'm here for the long term. I'm going to run as the Conservative leader at the next general election. This could well mean that she would be the Conservative Prime Minister in 10 years' time. Do you want that? Do you see her as being the right person? Are you a Conservative member, supporter, voter who think maybe she's being rather arrogant in saying what she said when ultimately it's not her decision, it's the party's? Call me. Do you want Theresa for the next 10 years? Let me know on 0345 60 60 973. You can text to 84850. You can email nigel@lbc.co.uk. I wonder, and we heard before the break from Peter Bone, independently very, very much independent of the party, but he's a Eurosceptic and he's a big supporter of Theresa May because he sees her as the best hope of Brexit. I wonder what Janice in Hendon thinks. Good afternoon, Janice.
Hi, good afternoon, Nigel. What do I think? First of all, Nigel, I always loved you, I admired you, and actually, you almost made me vote for Brexit. But why I'm disappointed in you now, we're in a mess. The country's in a mess. Really, we should have a coalition government. And really, we can't be in Brexit, but we're there. It's no point you winding the people up again to say we shouldn't have Theresa May. You are an agitator.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you. That's the nicest thing, Janice, anybody has said this week. I am proud to be an agitator. If I hadn't been an agitator, there'd have been no referendum and no hope or prospects of genuine fundamental change to our country, which, Janice, you may not want, but I do, and so do a majority of the British people.
No, I wanted it. I wanted a fundamental change to the country. Of course I did. But I think you agitated. I think you told people the wrong thing because you've walked away. You're not leading your party anymore.
I am in the European Parliament, Janice. I should be there. I should be there in a couple of weeks' time.
But you'll be out of there very shortly when we're out.
Well, do you know what? When we're out and we're a free country, governing ourselves and trading with the world, I won't matter, will I?
No, but you tried to get busy with Trump, but he didn't want to know you, and now you've had to come back.
He recommended me to be the British. He wanted me as the British ambassador in Washington, I'll have you know.
No. Well, I don't know about that. All I know, you're back in London, you're having to do LBC, and it's a pretty poor
Oh, they're not forcing me. I mean, it's not this or the Tower of London, Janice. I mean, actually, let me assure you, I'm doing LBC. I actually want to do it, and I want to have a debate. Now, look, Janice, you may well be somebody from the establishment who has a strong view against me, but that isn't really the point, is it? The point is, Theresa May, the leader of your party, and like you, a Remainer, has said today, following, a little bit of high altitude on a recent walking holiday, that she is going to stand as the Prime Minister at the next election, and the implication is, Janice, she could be Prime Minister in 10 years' time. Does that make sense?
Nigel, to be honest, does it make any difference who of them are Prime Minister? They're all as bad as each other. David Cameron let us down. I'm sure he'll eventually let us down. It doesn't really matter.
Who was the last Prime Minister, Janice, in your lifetime that made a real difference?
I think maybe, I don't know, maybe... none of them, actually, because I think anyone that goes into politics can't do anything else.
I disagree. I think that
Who
both...
do you think?
Well, I think both Tony Blair and Margaret Thatcher both fundamentally changed this country. Now, whether you agree with the direction in which they did it, they both did actually change Britain.
Yes, but she says she'll go now behind the European market and she'll try and get us out, and she's going behind it. I mean, I'm quite an old person, so for me it doesn't make much difference. I'll probably be dead by the time this all takes place.
Well, it could happen very quickly, Janice. I mean, Janice, do you regret the referendum? Do you think we should rerun the referendum?
Yes.
You do? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I rather thought you did. Well, I'm really sorry, Janice. It must be very difficult for you.
No, it's not.
No, democracy must be a very difficult concept for you. But I'm afraid that sometimes it doesn't go your way. But it's been lovely and charming to speak to you, and thank you.
And you've been charming too.
Thank you very much. Well, there you are, Janice from Hendon, who thinks we've all made the most ghastly error. And she's fully entitled to her view. But the idea that we should be forced into a second referendum on this, now that really would make me far less polite than I was on that phone call. I wonder what Hannah in Newbury thinks of Prime Minister May going on for 10 years or 20 years or forever.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'd first like to say that I'm very glad that you do LBC, because you've got your finger on the pulse of lots of things, and I think you hand over the best information to us.
Well, that's very kind, Hannah, and I've just had a very long meeting before this show with the LBC bosses, and I will be making an announcement about my future or otherwise with this station within the next hour or so.
Oh, good. Well, what I wanted to say is about Theresa May. She's always talking about the good of the country and the will of the people. Well, if she really had the good of the country at heart, rather than her personal political ambitions, why isn't she asking you to negotiate with Michel Barnier?
Because, Hannah, she hates me. Because I don't come from the same tribe as her. And for her, politics, it really is a very tribal thing. And anybody that is outside of that, she looks down her nose at with total and utter disdain. I think, of all the politicians I've met, certainly British politicians that I've met, because some of the French are quite good at this too, but of all the British politicians I've met, I don't think anybody has looked down upon me more disdainfully than Theresa May. Now, that could just...
That's her personal opinion, whereas really her priority should be the good of the country and the will of the people who voted for the Brexit that you campaigned for, and that should come first. And her personal feelings about you shouldn't really, come to the fore.
I don't think with her it's just me. I mean, it could be just me. It's possible, obviously. But I just think she takes a very, very tribal view. It's all about people in blue rosettes. They're the good guys. Everybody else is the bad guys. And Hannah, as I've said, ever since the referendum, if the government thought I could help them in any way at all, either with Brexit or with relations with the White House, I would have been happy to do either. They didn't want me. There we are. I think it's a shame.
I think it's worse than a shame. I think it's a tragedy.
Well,
because you are the best qualified person you know all the people in Brussels. You know all these people. You know how to handle them. You've handled them brilliantly with some brilliant speeches. And and it just seems crazy that you've been sidelined.
Well, Hannah,
you're a radio star now.
You're very sweet, Hannah. There are lots of people that agree with you on that I've done a great job. Many others who take a different view. But thank you for your call. And I'm going to go to Pevensey Bay in East Sussex, George. And, George, that must be very near where was it a chlorine cloud that came over at the weekend?
I don't know. We weren't actually this end of the world then. We're in a camper. We were up in Lingfield.
Oh, so you bailed out when the going got tough, George, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Have we... No, tell me, please, because I'm curious. Have we actually established Because it was sort of Berlin Gap, wasn't it? And very, very close to where you are. Have we actually established what that toxic cloud was?
Haven't got a clue, mate.
Haven't got a clue. No, fine.
No,
OK.
Nigel, haven't got a clue.
No, that's all right. But now tell me, do you have a clue when it comes to Theresa May being our Prime Minister for the next 10 years?
I would hate to see that.
Right.
That would probably put me in my grave.
Right.
The mere thought of a Conservative in charge of anything for 10 years is a terrifying thought. I think she should stay there and get us out of this European stuff.
Yeah.
As you know, but then she should go. I don't know who would replace her. I haven't got a clue, because they're all as bad as each other. They all lie through the teeth. They say one thing, do something else, and mean something entirely different.
Yeah, well, George, I mean, have you always disliked the Conservatives?
Yes.
You have?
Yeah, my father, I'm 78 almost now, Nigel. My father was a staunch socialist.
Yep. Yep.
And so was I. I voted religiously until I found out that MPs were building duck ponds with our money and having little duck houses, lovely things like that. I haven't voted since.
That was it, was it? You were so sick to death of the whole lot that you just bailed out of the whole process. And did you, George, did you vote in the referendum?
Yes, I did. In fact, I voted not to go in the first place, but yes, I did, to come out.
Right.
I had posters in the window and everything else.
Right, OK. But you're not... Yeah, but you know, so you voted to leave. We have a Prime Minister who says she now wants to be the leader of us leaving, but you somehow just haven't got the confidence in her.
No, I don't believe them. I just do not believe them. And as someone spouting on about another referendum, what are they going to have another one and another one until they get the answer they want?
Didn't you know the EU referendum was the best of three? Where have you been, George? No, I agree with you. Of course I do, George, thank you. But George, I'm not sure, is only against Theresa May being PM for 10 years. He's against anybody being PM, I think, for the next 10 years. So disenchanted is he with politics. Do we want Theresa May for the next year? I'd love to hear from you. If you're a big Theresa May supporter and you think her announcement today is the right thing, you can call me on 0345 6060 973. I'm Nigel Farage. Theresa May, she returns from a holiday walking high in the Alps and says, I am going to stand as the Conservative Prime Minister at the next general election in 2022, meaning she could well be the next Prime Minister for 10 years. 10 years she could be there for. And I'm asking you whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether you think perhaps actually, given where we are, there frankly isn't any other option for the government but to stick with her, because if they got rid of her, if there was some sort of coup attempted at the Tory party conference, that would lead to huge instability and perhaps even a general election. Well, let me give you some personal experience of why I think she said what she said. I was leader of UKIP for many, many years, and I remember once at a press conference being asked by a journalist, you know, how long would I stay on as UKIP leader? I said, I don't know. I'll stay on as long as the party wants me to stay on, which led, within 24 hours, to news stories and headlines. Farage could be on the verge of quitting if UKIP don't want him. And I thought, oh, I don't need that. That's a really negative story. That detracts, it deflects from the things we're trying to do. So the next time I was asked a similar question a couple of weeks later, you know, how long will you stay on as UKIP leader? I said, well, I thought I'd go on until at least 2035. And there were some mild sniggers, but the question didn't get asked again, and speculation ended. And I guess the lesson is that when Blair announced he was going to go, and when Cameron in the kitchen, in that personal interview, announced that he was going to go, in the end, you're kind of almost written off by the press and everybody as being somebody who's at the fag end of their leadership, their premiership. And I think that's what Theresa May wanted to avoid. She wanted to avoid this feeling that perhaps if she was going to go at the end of 19 or in 20, after Brexit, hopefully, that if that was the case, there would have been endless speculation about who's going to take over. And I don't actually, personally, really think Theresa May wants to be Prime Minister in 2027. I really don't think she does. It's a pretty gruelling job, and I thought before the holiday, frankly, she was looking pretty wearied by the whole thing, and that's certainly not her fault. They are the pressures of the job, but I think she said it, firstly, to dampen down speculation at the Tory party conference, but secondly, to hopefully give her a clear run of a couple of years without this question being asked. That, from my experience, is why you would say it. I wonder what Laura, who's calling from Andover, thinks. Laura, good afternoon.
Hi, Nigel. It's good to speak to you, but you've just made my point for me.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I think the 10 years is a red herring, and we should basically ignore that. I think it's important that she came back and asserted her authority and made it sound like, at least, that she's going to lead the party. I think that was absolutely fundamental for her party, for the government, and for the country. I think you're right. I think they need to move away from all this, what's going to happen next. That's irrelevant. We must get the deal done to get out of Europe. That's fundamentally the most important job she has to do.
Do you know, Laura,
she has to focus on that. In
sort of late July, and kind of things had pretty much broken up. And it was late July, and I was in Washington, and a sort of a breakfast type private gathering, and they were all asking me, American political figures and some journalistic figures, business figures, and they were all asking me, well, what is Mrs. May's future? And I said, unless she comes back and grips the situation very early in the autumn, she'll be gone by Christmas. And that was my view. And I think that Laura, is what she's trying to do. I don't know whether she'll succeed, but it's what she's trying to do. I mean, did you, like me, feel before the summer break that she didn't look to be very much in charge?
Oh, I think it was terrible, and the media have a lot to answer for in that respect as well, because they do whip up hysteria about these things. But nevertheless, that's the world we live in. But yes, I think it was very, very difficult for her, and I'm glad she's come back and is appearing to use a firm hand. And I think that was really, really vital. Otherwise, it was just going to go on and her job was just going to get harder. And, the thing is, Nigel, a week is a long time in politics.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember who said that.
Harold Wilson first said it, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So I just think, it doesn't matter whether she's there in 10 years. Let's look at getting through this critical 2-year period to get out.
Yeah, it's about it's about short-term stability. That's why she's doing it.
It is.
Yeah, and actually, I have to say, before the summer break, I don't think I'd blame the press, Laura. I think I'd blame the fact that we had every single week the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, contradicting the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson, and vice versa. They made the press's life incredibly easy, and the ship, I have to say, did look pretty rudderless. I thought she'd be gone by Christmas unless she gets a grip. This is her first chance to do it. And Laura in Andover thinks she's doing it dead right. Laura, thank you very much indeed for your call. I welcome your texts on this subject. 84850. Do we want Theresa for the next 10 years? Or do we think, as Laura from Andover thinks and I think, that actually the 10-year thing is a red herring? It's simply about short-term stability within the party. And you can tweet at LBC using the hashtag Farage on LBC. We go north of the border to Edinburgh to ask Jessie. Jessie, are you a Leave voter?
Yes.
And do you think Theresa May's the right Prime Minister to carry it out?
I think short term she's going to have to be, isn't she? But it's extremely concerning and very arrogant from her to kind of say, that's it, you got me now. I'm going to be the one leading for the next 5 years at least. As a young person, especially in Scotland, I mean, we all hate her up here. And
why?
She's just...
Why?
Well, she's not... I think partly you compare her to Ruth Davidson, who is just an absolute gem at it. And Theresa May, she's not personable, she's not fun, she's nothing. She can do the job and that's about it, and she can't even do it that well. And, I mean, there were times I was going to Scottish Conservative events in Edinburgh or in Glasgow, and when people heard Theresa May was coming, it was more kind of like, you know what, we've actually got this, maybe you should focus south of the border. But
Jessie, is this an age thing? I mean, you're obviously very young. I can tell that. Is it her demeanour, her manner? Is it a sort of touch of the home counties? Is it about class? Is it about age? Is it just you, the younger generation, put off by her, or is it broader than that in Scotland, in your view?
I think it's broader, but definitely with the young people. I mean, I know, I'm a total Tory. I've got friends who are avid Tories, and we all dislike her. We've never liked her. I wanted Andrea Leadsom didn't get her, and I was kind of like, well, you know what, Theresa May seems to be going forth with this. She's dedicated to getting Brexit, and I think it is a short-term thing. She's just going to have to, we're going to have faith in her for the next 2 years, but after that, I mean, there's no way in hell she's staying.
And are you one of these young supporters that I get texts and tweets and phone calls from that thinks Jacob Rees-Mogg could be the answer in a couple of years' time?
I love Jacob Rees-Mogg. I think he's definitely got momentum up here.
Right, very, very good. Jessie, thank you. Interesting call. Jessie, committed Tory, north of the border, you know, voted Brexit, attends Tory party meetings, doesn't like Mrs May one little bit, but, and here's the crucial bit, thinks it's right that she stays on as Prime Minister, frankly, because we need a bit of stability to get the Brexit process through. And there's quite a few of you saying whether you like Mrs May or not, and whether you want her there for 10 years or not, which I've not yet had a single phone call from anyone saying they wanted her for 10 years. But maybe there's a bit of a consensus building around the fact that at least if she stays for the foreseeable future, we avoid general elections or even more political instability. Andy in Cardiff, what do you make of it all?
Good afternoon. I think that people, especially the press and most people, have seriously underestimated Theresa May. You know me, Nigel. I'm a regular caller.
I know you are, yeah.
By no means am I a Tory voter. What I will say is there are two very quick points. The first point is Theresa May is one of only two politicians on Brexit that have actually mentioned the WTO scheduled payments that the EU will have to pay if they don't make a deal with the UK.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people don't know this because it hasn't been reported in the news, it hasn't been reported in the press. And when we actually leave the EU, regardless on which terms we actually leave, as long as we're not members, we will become voting members of the WTO. And in doing so, there are schedules that the EU must pay to do any trade they wish to do with us. And that's going to go into the billions. It's not going to be millions, it's going to be billions. And what they're trying to do is cover off what they would have to pay us in the long run.
So why doesn't the government make more of that, Andy? Why doesn't the government point out that actually having a sensible free trade deal is in all of our interests, whichever way you look at it?
Well, there's a very clear point as to why they won't do that, and that is that they can then be accused of pushing for WTO rules. And they don't want to be doing that. They want a trade deal that's amicable on both sides, and so on. They don't want to be seen as forcing the EU into WTO rules just so the EU will get stung with a payment.
But in one way, Andy, it'd be quite a clever thing to do, wouldn't it? Say, look, the worst-case scenario of us not having a trade deal is perhaps going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt us.
They've already been told, as far as I can gather. And, you know, they're trying to play hardball now with this 100 billion and the 60 billion.
Oh, yes.
To cover off what they'd have to pay in.
Andy, we'll discuss that at the top of the hour. We'll talk about the performance of Barnier. We'll talk about the performance of David Davis. But just very quickly, Andy, do you, I mean, whatever the rights and wrongs of Theresa May, and you're not a Tory voter, is it right that she's tried to steady the situation and to stay on as Prime Minister for the next few years?
Well, that was my second point. My second point is very clear, and that is that I don't think that Theresa May will run again at the next election. I think her legacy will be a successful Brexit and the delivery of the transition period, and then she'll stand down and somebody else will run at the next election. That's my view.
I think you're probably right, Andy. Thank you very much indeed. I'm Nigel Farage, standing in for Ian Dale at Drive on L. Theresa May shocks everybody by saying she's here for the long term and that she wants to lead the party into the next general election in 2022. It means she could be PM for the next 10 years, and I've been asking you how you feel about that. And actually, nobody really thinks she'll be the PM in 10 years' time. But has she done the right thing short term to try to stop speculation about her leadership and perhaps, if I give her the benefit of the doubt, to get on with Brexit? Actually, I have to say, folks, on balance, I think she's right to say what she's said, and I learnt myself as party leader of UKIP for many, many years that if you allow speculation about when your leadership will end, it actually damages and stops you from getting on and doing anything. So I've never been a fan of Theresa May. I've always thought a Remainer being the PM during Brexit was an odd place to be, but I think actually, in terms of political tactics, she's played this the right way. That's my view. And you can agree with that, disagree with that on 03456 6060 973, and we get a lead to speak to Johnny. Johnny, what do you think?
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. So what do you think, Johnny?
Speak to you, Nigel. I think that she's become too ineffective, and I think Jacob Rees-Mogg should take over.
Right, Johnny. Now, there's a slight problem with that, all right? Now, look, Jacob...
I know he's not... it's something to do with the leadership. He couldn't be leader because of his present position.
Oh, no, he could be. He could be. I mean, it would be unprecedented for somebody to go from the back benches to the leadership, but there is no rule.
That's right, yeah.
There is no rule or law that prohibits that. But you have to ask yourself, and by the way, Johnny, when I said, before you came on, that I think she's done the right thing, in terms of political tactics, I think she's done the right thing. Doesn't mean I think she's the right leader. But the difficulty with Jacob Rees-Mogg or anybody else becoming leader is, think of the process. Think of the agony the party would have to go through to get rid of her and to get him or somebody else in. And that, that is the problem, Johnny, is that it could be... I don't know, 8 weeks, 10 weeks of absolute turmoil and chaos at a time when we're supposed to be in serious negotiations over Brexit.
Yeah, you've got a point. I can't disagree with that. It's just when you see him on Question Time or anything like that, it's just so... His responses are always so measured and clever. I just think he'd make a great leader, that's all.
So you just think this guy...
I think he would have been quite good, actually, as well.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Johnny, but...
He should have stepped back up to the plate and become the leader of UKIP again.
Well, all in good time, dear boy. We'll see where the world takes us,
Okay.
But you think Jacob's got the qualities to be a PM?
I think he'd be fantastic, yeah. I really do. I think he'd be great.
Johnny, I think it's very interesting, and I think there's a surprising number of people who've sort of rallied to the Jacob flag over the course of the last few months. But all I can say is that and he could be great, and I shared platforms with him during the Brexit campaign. He's a very principled, very decent person, but to get Jacob or anybody else in would be a considerable amount of turmoil. And had this Prime Minister come back from the summer break looking still weak and not appearing to be in control, I think they would have had to go through that period of turmoil. I think what she's trying to do is grip the nettle. Johnny, I thank you very much for your call and your kind comments too. Jim from Kensington, good afternoon.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you.
Good to speak to you. So 10 years of Theresa, how does that sound?
It doesn't sound good at all. I think we've got a Tory party which is totally out of touch with its normal base. Being from Kensington, as you know, Nigel, we haven't got a Conservative MP in this borough, have we?
Things have changed.
I should say.
Things have changed.
Exactly, which is astonishing.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't got a clue why, but I wouldn't know why I'm going to vote. I don't vote for her because I think she's out of touch. I mean, she doesn't provide what we expect from a Conservative party for people who are natural Conservative voters.
So, Jim, your position is couldn't be clearer, could not be clearer. But what do you think should happen?
When I look at the Conservative Party, I can't see anybody there who would represent someone like me.
Right.
And I'm in business. I'm fairly well qualified. I'm in business. I live and work in this area of London. I would be a natural Conservative, and I see nobody out there who I can possibly connect to.
What, nobody?
And, I mean, I can say I connect to you, in a way.
Okay.
Not from all of your views, obviously. But none of these people are friendly, or, they can't empathise with you. I mean, they just don't care about us. We're small business people. They don't care.
So politics, Jim, doesn't represent you in any way at all?
No, not at all.
No.
You can't go around doubling business rates just at the drop of a hat. You can't go around saying to people you're going to put dementia tax on. You can't go around just continually taking money out of people's pockets, which they're working hard for.
So, Jim, whether it's Theresa or anybody else, frankly, you can't see anybody better than her right now.
No, not unless they stand up and start telling you what they believe in. What does the Conservative Party stand for?
No, fine. Jim, couldn't be clearer. A bit of breaking news. Play has been suspended at the Oval during Surrey's County Championship clash against Middlesex after a metal arrow landed on the outfield not far from the players and umpires. We'll bring you more on that as soon as we get it. And my last caller on this subject is Leslie from Gidea Park in Essex. Leslie, hello.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi.
I'm an avid UKIP supporter.
Right.
Even Gerard Batten knows that. Theresa May wouldn't have been in power the next morning unless she gave £1 billion of our tax money to the Irish to keep herself in a job. So I can't see where she comes from with the 10-year plan.
I don't think the DUP would call themselves Irish. They'd call themselves British from Northern Ireland, but I get the point you're making, yes. So, OK, she went into this premiership post the election in a very weak position. Is it right she should attempt to stay there?
Well, I think it's morally wrong, because she wouldn't have been there hadn't she given out £1 billion to the British people in Northern Ireland, OK?
Yeah.
She wouldn't have even had a position in Parliament. She could have been outvoted every time.
Leslie, it's perfectly clear you think she's a dud, and I get that. You couldn't be clearer, but would you have an alternative? Should somebody else do it?
Well, there's only one person I can think of, and that's a guy called Nigel Farage.
Oh, but I'm not in the Tory party, and they can't stand me, so it's not going to be me, Leslie. So that isn't going to happen, mate. I mean, fun idea, but it isn't going to happen.
What about Mogg? I think he's the only person who's grounded and understands politics and also understands the people.
Well, I think Jacob's got terrific qualities, but I think it's unlikely that he can aspire to the leadership at this stage. I'm not saying he can't in a few years' time. The real question, Leslie, is does the Tory party want to go through the agony of 8 or 10 weeks of trying to find a new leader? And I suspect they won't. Leslie, I thank you. I thank all of our callers on that subject. Not one of you thought that they wanted Theresa May for the next 10 years, but I think many of you thought that actually, in practical terms, probably her saying this has given a bit of stability.